Well, brother, thank you for being here. How are things going today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
For sure, man. So, we're going to break the ice here. What got you interested in YouTube apologetics, and what is your primary focus for those who have no clue who you are?
Sure. So, my name is Pastor Ben. I run a channel called Cleave to Antiquity. And I do a lot of debates, do Protestant apologetics, answering the claims of Rome in the East. The thing that really got me into doing this type of YouTube channel was I'd already been doing debates quite often on Discord and other platforms. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Redeemed Zoomer, and he was like, "Why don't you just make a YouTube? Because nobody's doing this." So it took me a little while, but eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I haven't looked back since. It's been a fun time.
So, Zoomer was the gateway to breaking the
Yeah.
ice on YouTube, so all of your critics can go and shoot their arrows at him.
Yep. There you go. Exactly. Yep. He's the culprit.
Yeah. With that being the case, you've been doing this for a minute now. Not years and years, but you've been doing it long enough to be able to kind of get a pulse on the apologetic scene currently. And where do you feel like things are heading? Because maybe it's just me, and maybe there's like some biases there. Could be the case, anecdotal, those types of things. But nevertheless, it definitely feels like there's kind of like a shift in the air, if you will.
Yeah. So when I first started, it was completely dominated by Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic apologists. There were just so many, and it seems like they would make videos on the same subject. Like it almost seems like they're like teaming up in some kind of backroom chat that we're all going to attack this one subject at the same time. And there really weren't too many Protestant voices on YouTube addressing these types of objections in any kind of sufficient way, even historically. Sometimes the response would just be to outright reject history, which is not at all what I do on my channel. It's very historically based. We go through church history. We answer most of the questions through the lens of church history. We try to approach these objections on their own terms and doing internal critiques. There really was not a lot of channels that were doing this prior to, at least at the time when I was coming on the scene about a year ago. Now, I honestly feel like there is a little bit of a shift, like you were just saying. I think we are seeing a little more of a thoughtful response from the Protestant side, but it's still just a seed, in my opinion. It's still just a seed. It needs to continue to grow. We need more thoughtful responses. Like, honestly, what you're doing on your channel, I think is great. Kind of a more evergreen approach. Now, I know mine most of the time is like addressing pop apologetics. I'll see like some of the bad arguments from Rome in the East, and I'll be like, okay, I'm clipping that. I'm doing a response to this. I'm going to show you why this argument doesn't work, and I'm going to give them the tools to respond to it on their own terms. But yeah, I think there is at this current point a large deficiency, at least on the Protestant side, of strong apologetic arguments to be used against the Roman Catholics, at least in the YouTube space. We need better debaters, in my opinion. The Protestants have to be able to work on their rhetoric skills, because you'll have guys that are very thoughtful, guys that are very good at doing theology. There are a lot of Protestants who are apologists. And what I mean by that is they're good at apologetics generally. So you have guys like Jordan Cooper, you've got guys like Keith Foskey, etc. But you don't have a lot of people that are engaged in the Protestant apologetic sphere specifically. And I think that is a distinct lack. It's a need that needs to be filled. And we need more people who are interested in that are also interested and skilled to do these types of debates. I think that's really where the need is.
Yeah, in the line with what you said about rhetoric, just one example that comes to mind that's a perfect example of this is the debate that was on your channel where Sean from Anglican Aesthetics, perfect example, great rhetoric. I mean, the guy's rhetoric is
Yeah.
phenomenal. He did a great job in that debate. And I think that's kind of a perfect case study of what it is that you're saying. There's a difference between rhetoric and really understanding just like theology proper, even historical theology proper. There's a difference between being able to engage in those things and then also actually bring those things into a defensible sphere. And so, yeah, there definitely needs to be a lot more of that. I got started too because while there isn't a ton of like external facing apologetics, like what you described of arguments against Roman Catholics and the Orthodox, et cetera, I also saw a really big need for internal facing apologetics of like,
Mhm.
how do we get the guy in the pew really more interested and fired up so that he could potentially, for all he knows, he has an untapped gift for rhetoric or something
Right.
along those lines, trying to really get them beefed up and fired up about this to make them a lot less susceptible to these really bad arguments against Protestantism that just unfortunately become the dominating voice for whatever reasons. So, yeah, man, it's exciting though, like you said, to see a seed of that and to see kind of what that's going to sprout to in the future. Now, with that in mind, what are some of what you believe to be the biggest defeaters of other traditions outside of Protestantism? What have you encountered out there that you just think is, ooh, man, that's just like a deal breaker?
Sure. I mean, with apologetics, you kind of go through these seasons where the hot topic kind of comes into focus and leaves focus. We just got out of the season of harping on Vatican II, but I've been discussing this for years. Vatican II has always been, in my opinion, a defeater for the Roman Catholic position. Even if you were to just look at the language change from Vatican I to Vatican II, where it's like condemned heretics to, oh, they're separated brethren, no big deal. And then, so that in of itself is a defeater for all of those pop apologetic claims that you would see back in the day, where it was like, oh, it's this unbroken chain of tradition, 2,000 years of tradition, and you're missing out on this, which is just blatantly false. And another subject on Vatican II itself, Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium, in my opinion, are indefensible. The fact that they are bound by ecumenical council to affirm that Muslims have the same God as them, when the Muslim God isn't triune. Our God is the Trinity. You're talking about an ontological difference. It's not a difference of attributes. You can't just take God and splice them up into, different pieces and, you've got this piece of God, so it's close enough. No, you either have God or you don't have God. My God is the Trinity. My God is Jesus Christ. If I were to take a Muslim and take him back to, the time of the crucifixion, we hop in my handy dandy time machine and we look up at Jesus on the cross, and I say, is that your God? What would he tell me? He would tell me no. So I think that in and of itself is a defeater for the Roman Catholic system. And then also, I mean, you just kind of have these practical cases to break down these pop apologetic arguments, which are really rampant, particularly with Rome right now. Oh, it's this big traditional institution. You should become Roman Catholic because, on the Protestant side, they're not very traditional. We're super, super traditional. Yeah. And then you go to your like average Novus Ordo mass or something, and it's just like, it's like a bingo parlor or something like that. I do videos of compilations of liturgical abuse. It's rampant in Rome, and not a lot of people are realizing this. At least on the Protestant side, they really do get lured in by the edits. And then they get there and they're like, the church is not at all like these edits I saw on TikTok. Yeah. We're the Crusaders praying the rosary. I thought this was supposed to be awesome.
This isn't what Byzantine Crusader 49 told me.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. So I think they step into the church and they realize it's not at all what they've been sold, but they stick around anyway for whatever reason. There used to be this meme that we would say share quite a bit. It was like that circle or whatever, and it was like would convert from to Roman Catholicism, would convert to Orthodoxy, then back to Roman Catholicism, then back to Orthodoxy. Yeah. Every scandal just continuously converting in a circle. But I think those would be the biggest objections that I would have for Roman Catholicism. I mean, there's tons of other ones. I have entire playlists of arguments against Rome on my channel. But I do think we need to elevate the level of discourse, because there are some really bad arguments that people use against Roman Catholicism.
Like, and it doesn't do anybody any good to use those. It hurts all parties involved.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Which is why, at least on my channel, I'm not afraid to post the stuff that's like slightly offensive even to my own side. Like the perpetual virginity of Mary video I did got a lot of backlash, but I'm like, you know what? It needs to be discussed, because if we can get past the very basic stuff, if we can get past like the knee-jerk reaction to, oh, that sounds too Catholic, or that type of knee-jerk reaction, I think then we can truly have more fruitful dialogue with them and get to the core issues past just, oh, you worship Mary or something like that. You know what I mean?
I've never been a fan. It's been a while before I've been a fan of like that sort of like slop argumentation, because it doesn't take very long. Well, you may not know this, but my background, in terms of evangelism, is actually street evangelism. Mm-hmm. So when you're out on the street, man, it's very different than even
Right.
like the online YouTube world. And that really wasn't a thing as much as it is now when I was out doing this. And you run into all sorts of people. You have to be able to dialogue with Hindus and Muslims and Roman
Right.
Catholics and Greek Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox and all sorts of Hare Krishnas. And so when you're doing that, man, you quickly learn when you're just on the spot face to face with people, when you start using slop like that, like, the Bible says, call no man father.
Right.
You
Right.
you very quickly realize, like, okay, obviously they're aware of this, man. If it's like it's that obvious, they obviously are aware of this, and you need to get into that a little bit further than just shouting these sorts of slogans that they
Hmm.
do a really good job in the echo chamber of like really rallying up your base and rah rah rah. We see a lot of that on Twitter from all sides of just their slop on all sides where they just throw this, if your church didn't start until 1517, shouldn't that cause you to rethink things? Mic drop.
Hmm.
Ooh, yeah. Like we've really never thought about that one before. It just those sorts of things don't really move the needle. Um, One thing that you mentioned too, that's just in terms of like defeater arguments. I don't find the defenses to this drastic switch between Trent and Vatican II around, all these anathemas, these formal
Right.
anathemas against us for all these varying beliefs that we do hold, and then the negatives, the things that we reject. And those haven't been repealed. Those
Hmm.
have not been change. There's been no recognition of that being a formally different understanding today than it was back then. I know a lot of
Right.
modern apologists today want to try and do that. They want to wax over the fact that it's an anathema and say, well, it's not as bad as you're making it sound. Yeah,
Right.
okay, well, if we actually go back, the individuals that were making these pronouncements, they're apparently being led by the Spirit in this. They understood this to mean something very specific. And then to just
Hmm.
fast forward and not really address the substance of that and now be like, well, okay, you're actually separated brethren. You do have some grace in your communions, and it's not the fullness of the truth, but you still have some, legitimacy in some capacity. I just find that to be really cope. I find that to be a lot
Right.
of you're just kind of anachronistically trying to do like Janny. You're trying to be a janitor and like clean up the fact that it's like you didn't
Yeah.
think it's like at the time the expectation was, oh, Luther and those heretics, they'll die off like every other heresy in history. They'll kind of become obscure or whatever, and then it
Hmm.
turns into this thing that's like, well, okay, that obviously didn't happen. And so now that there's this massive number and Rome doesn't have the same political control that it once did, it's like, okay, well, okay, you're separated brethren. That's just the way it comes across to me. And I've
Right.
listened to like the most charitable, what I believe to be the charitable defenses on this from people like Eric Ibarra, et cetera. And I don't buy it, man. I don't buy it at all. The other thing for me too, that's really just a defeater is, and I'm sympathetic to a lot of these, as a video on my channel recently showed. But the Marian dogmas, the dogmatic elevation and status on
Hmm.
those, I think is pretty wild. Now I know that they'll have again some hyper nuancing and getting really loft and qualified.
Yeah.
I know they'll have some of that going on, but it's Grandma Betty down at the Baptist church is, potentially going to have her sins stand against her because, at one point in her life, somebody shared the idea of the bodily assumption with her and she just said, well, that's not biblical. And I reject that. And
Mm.
that, well, she could be, they'll always do this. Well, there could be this exception. There could be, but man, the
Right.
documentation makes it very clear. If it's presented to you and you reject it, you now have a different level of responsibility than someone who didn't. And I just find the elevation of those things to dogmatic status to be very problematic, especially considering the fact that you have to retcon a lot of people in history, and say, well, they got a pass because it wasn't dogmatically defined at that point. But now moving forward, I saw Kevin Fernandez say that, for example, that, yeah, people before
Hmm.
get a pass, but now that it's been dogmatically defined, that's changed. Well, then it doesn't seem like it's inherently heresy in the belief. It seems that it's really
Right.
just, well, you're going against what the church says. And to me, that really puts you in a vicious bind where you really have no way of checking and getting out of that. You're really supposed to just submit, and if your critical thinking and your reasoning brings you to other conclusions outside of what the church has said, well, you're cut off. You're in trouble. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I don't necessarily have as much of an issue with the exclusivity claims because every group has some sort of exclusivity claim. The issue that I run into is this. If you're not being direct and honest about what you actually believe on these particular issues, even from a institutional level, to me that just screams shady, 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 shady. We're going to redefine anathema. We're going to redefine these terms, at least in the pop apologetic sphere. Anathema, if you were to look at the minutes of Nicaea 2, it's very explicit exactly what it means. It means nothing less than complete separation from God, period. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you're just separated, brethren. Oh, you're just a little confused. No, it means you're going to hell. That's what anathema means. So if you're direct and upfront with this, I guess I would probably have less of an issue. It's like, okay, well, they say they're the one true church. They have ABC 1, 2, 3. I might still disagree, but I would respect them a lot more if it was just a direct thing. You know what I mean? But it does seem like they're tying themselves into knots to have to reconcile this because it's a complete 180 from, just like you said, from the position of Trent where they're issuing these anathemas, and now they're trying this new ecumenist thing. We're going to be a big tent. We're going to introduce ABC 1, 2, 3. There was a recent thing where they just they concelebrated the Eucharist with a female priestess. Did you see that? The Roman Catholic? Yes. So you're saying all this sort of like this 180, this ecumenist push, which is the exact opposite of what you see in Trent. If your dogmatic declarations, if your anathemas aren't actually held to in practice, and you're going to have to retcon them later on, I don't know. To me, that's a huge issue, at least in practice, because that's exactly what it is. They're not coming out and saying, oh, we were wrong at Trent. But in practice, they're basically saying, oh, we were wrong at Trent.
Right. One last thing on that before we close things down here. I've noticed this in all of the what I call the one true church groups. There tends to be, now there's a spectrum, of course, regarding how problematic this is for any given group. But what I find with all of them is it tends to be that way. It starts out as this very clear, we understand our identity. It's just us. Outside of here is the equivalent of being outside of Noah's Ark. You're drowning. You're going to go to hell, etc. And then over time, that gradually becomes somewhat shifty because you see the same thing in Seventh-day Adventism. Funnily enough. Now, they don't have as long of a history as the Church of Rome, but it's just interesting because you see an exact same parallel there. You see the clear remnant identity. We are God's last day, end times people. And there's still people within, their movement that hold that firm. But there's also been this massive push for this. No, brother, we're just like you. We're all Christ Church. I find that there tends to be a breaking point for a lot of those sorts of things because it seems that it's always like the future doesn't pan out the way that they really need things to pan out. And so they kind of have to do Janny services, if you will. So, well, man, is there anything else you want to share with people before we shut things down here?
I would just say if you want to subscribe to the channel, I have a lot of interesting debates coming up. I'm trying to set up a surrounded style debate where Sean Luke's going to debate 6 other opponents. We're trying to settle on a subject, but stay tuned. We're going to have some interesting stuff coming up. I do live streams every Thursday with guests. So if you're interested in apologetics, subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man. And if you, like he said, if you want to learn more about his channel, you can quickly get there. A link for that is in the description box down below. But with that said, if you are a Protestant, this is a reminder that you don't need to convert. You just need to remember